Waiting for John. Hey.
What's up?
What's up, buddy? How are you?
Good.
You seem very mellow.
Well, I just did an hour.
You did an hour? So have you been doing an hour? You're doing occasional hours?
Just before this. Just before this. Once
amazing,
a week,
man.
Doing an hour.
Wow. So you're doing an hour of meditation once a week, just only before we do this thing.
Yeah. Well, I've realized, and I think I envy humans that can, who can bulldog their way through life. They're always on it. I think I have to prepare for things.
Huh.
And I think I've started understanding that about myself later in life. I think maybe I would have been a better student in school if I prepared myself.
What up, Sean Desmond? Hey, do you think that's a real thing? Do you think there are actually wildly successful people that only bulldog and don't prepare? Or what percentage of people? It doesn't seem like very many. Or maybe you and I are just, that's why we're friends, is that preparation, it turns out, as we get older, like if you start writing the paper a week before it's due, that's actually a good thing, even though everybody talks about, I'm so good at doing things last minute, which is also kind of true. But like that preparation seems extremely important for most people.
I guess maybe it's grass is always greener thing, and I imagine that people can kind of just get through it, the crammers. And at the same time, having a same day deadline on a song on Sunday, like though I was tired and didn't feel like working, there's a level of hunkering down and diving in, and that pressure that accentuates the outcome. And I do think that there's there's value to that too. It's
interesting. Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot. I was talking to my buddy Donut, amazing producer. I think yesterday we were chatting about it, and I referenced my conversations with you. This conversation, which I'm glad we're doing again, by the way. Thank you to everybody for all the feedback last time. And
I'm pretty pumped
cool
about
to do.
this.
And let's we've got some questions and feedback and clarifications. We'll get to all that. But was talking to Donut about the idea of getting last minute deadlines, making deadlines. I was with CJ Barron yesterday. We were sprinting my hill, and talking about the idea of having deadlines, making deadlines for yourself if you don't have them. And I think a lot of people who do what we do, it's actually very difficult to self-motivate sometimes, especially those of us that are maybe more pure songwriters or pure just creatives, that having deadlines, setting parameters, it's a really, really important thing to do.
Yep.
I know you were talking about that on Sunday. You had a mix that was, you said, a day turnaround?
Same day. I got the stems at 10 a.m., delivered it by 5 p.m.
It's a different kind of feeling to have those parameters. It does accelerate things in a really interesting way.
Yeah, and in a sense, you have to be, everyone in the process seems to maybe be less precious about it, because they know it has to. They understand the timeline. Granted, I think you're calling upon someone you trust, and that goes back to last week discussing reliability and professionalism, and the fact that they could hit me up and they know that they're going to get what they need by the end of the day says a lot about our relationship and I guess my experience. So that does play a role. But yeah, it seems like maybe I did nail it, or maybe there just less notey because we knew the timeline was there. Whatever it is, I think everyone's on their game and ready to go, ready to knock it out. So, I streamed with the producer before I sent it to the artist. So I knew the producer. So you're taking the appropriate steps to get it across the line as fast as possible, making sure people are around. Hey man, can you jump on a stream in like 30 minutes? I'm close to having something. You're giving people a heads up so they can plan their own deadlines out, right? So if I were to say, hey, I'm good, can you listen now? And dude's like, man, I'm out. Like, oh man. But if I give you 30 minutes to an hour, I know that you can prepare to be ready. So, these aren't things that I thought of in the moment. I'm thinking about them now and how that kind of works out, right? And that becomes part of the process.
One of the pieces of feedback we got, or a number of questions I got, I'm sure you had a lot of conversations yourself with people after our live last week. The idea of mentorship, wisdom. I had a few questions. What did you learn? What were the other things you learned from? For myself, working for Eric Valentine and other producers, you working with Tony. and I think that idea of reliability, consistency, people talk about the word professionalism. I think what professionalism is just being reliable and being nice to deal with. But that reliability, so you get a call on a Sunday, it says we need this today. You get that call because they know you can deliver it. And you're not adding any extra stress to their process, which is normally a stressful process. Finishing records, it's a stressful process for a lot of people involved. A lot of people have a lot of stakes, and you as the mixer, the finisher, they are hiring you not just because you'll make it sound good, but because it's on time, you'll be pleasant to deal with, and you won't have all these other aspects of the record making process which are stressful, and you provide that. How do you think about that? Did you see that with Tony as I saw with Eric? How do you think about deadlines and dealing with people and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good thing to discuss. I actually just in real time, I think it was yesterday, I was finishing up a song for someone, and the producer was kind of surprised I was down to hop on the phone on a Zoom call, even on FaceTime, because notoriously mixers are so mysterious and it's hard to get them on the phone, and it's like, wait,
they're on an island somewhere.
Like, where are they? What do they do? What do they use? All these mysterious questions about these top mixers, and I want to disband the mystery. So I want to hop on the call. I want to know what you want from me. I want to know how far I'm supposed to go. But he thought this was kind of wild. So I learned that from Tony. So discussing mentorship, he always got on the phone. He was like, if you have a question before starting the song, get the producer, artist, A&R, someone on the phone. It's always the thing he went back to. He's so personable. Like, get in the room with the person if they can. Granted, COVID right now, I don't want people in the room. No offense, but I just don't feel safe having multiple. So the attended session thing, that's probably for another discussion. I don't know how that evolves in the next year or two. But I'm usually down for that. I prefer that, doing notes in the room and connecting with people, and Tony did too. So I think I'm coming from that school of be personable. People are calling you, like you just said, because they want to deal with you. They want to work with you because they like you. I think we went through a phase of maybe 3 decades even of the hotshot producer. Man, they're kind of a dick, but it doesn't matter because they deliver hits or something. I think people want to deal with people that are
their
cool
snare
right
drum
now.
Sounds so good. They are entitled. They're like, the idea of rock star mixers I find hilarious, even though I find many mixers to be total amazing super talent rock stars. That idea of this being, I mean, I guess it's part of what we're trying to do here is have conversations and normalize or demystify so much of this process, which is like, I was talking to somebody the other day, and there's been some discussions on Instagram and throughout producers and writers in the industry about royalties and about a bunch of these things. And my ultimate, like, what is it, 1,000-foot view, that like when I step back and do that meta analysis of it, anybody can do this stuff. And that's a really amazing thing. I mean, in terms of the technical abilities, everybody's got a laptop, everybody can be a songwriter. I mean, I was saying to somebody that if I was 19 right now, I'd be an artist, a producer, a mixer, a video director, a live streamer, a fashion blogger. Like, I just do everything because it's all available to you. So why does it have to be a mysterious thing? I mean, producers are putting their samples on Splice. People are telling, going through mixes and going through productions, telling you how they did things. The idea of demystifying it seems really important. And in addition to that, it's the understanding that you should be able to have all the communication that you want with people when they hire you.
I was talking to my friend Howard Johnson about this the other night, because he's he gets really involved in records in their completion. Right, he did the entirety of the last Harry Styles album,
amazing,
with Kid Harpoon, and and there's an engineer there, and there's a team, and I find it. I'm not using this as the example for how this went down, because they did have one mixer. I mixed one song on the album, but they had Spike Stent mix the rest of it, right? So there's a mixer seeing the rest of it to completion. But I had this thought about, he was, referring to the group as a squad, like a football team, and everyone kind of goes to camp together and they all work. Why are we just passing off mixes to mixers and we're not in communication with the artist? Why is the mixer not part of the internal squad? And I think at some point, and we can probably trace it back to when it changed, but at some point the engineer would mix the record. It would be the same engineer that recorded it would mix it and deliver it. Now, there's specialization, and I think that's great. And with Pro Tools, you could do it from home. You don't have to show up to New York City to the studio. You don't have to show up to LA to the studio. You can remotely do this. I mean, that's why Serban remains in Virginia Beach, kind of doing this thing, because he figured out this lifestyle workflow balance that suited him and his family, I'm sure, mostly. So, but we seem to be this mysterious pass off, hope we get something good back. And on the extreme, we're singing the same song to 3 mixers. We're not telling them that it's happening, and then we're picking the best one. It's like,
it feels very old model. I mean, it feels like record companies trying to continue on a business model of just hiring a professional for a particular job. And the reality is, I mean, we talked about this a little bit last week. You have made a very conscious decision to be a mixer, be a finisher, be a refiner, to go down that road because it seems to me, I'll speak for you, that's what your personality is. That's what you love the process of excellence in simplification. That's why you're a good cook. That's, all these sort of things, or chef, or I don't know, culinary artist. When are you gonna get the Jon, the cooked by Jon Castelli? I keep tagging it.
It's already there.
I know, but are you going to start promoting? Anyway, that's a whole nother conversation.
No, I just post. It looks like a food blog.
I think you're going to be a world famous chef in about 5 years. But it is interesting to see that that's a very conscious choice based on your personality. But really, everybody who's making records has the ability to be a writer and a producer and a mixer and all those sorts of things. And it's interesting you put it like that like having a squad, having a team, things are becoming more team based in that way. Mm-hmm. Even like A&Rs managing producers and plugging them into projects. I don't begrudge anyone for doing that sort of thing. The idea, and I actually think encouraging the idea of making records with your team, with your people, and learning every part of the process. I think I said to you, the way I learned how to be a producer before I knew what a producer was, this is like, late 90s, early 2000s when I was a kid, was that, okay, I have my friend, he raps, and my other friend plays drums. Well, I'll figure out how to record it, and maybe I can record his beats, and then then I got a drum machine, or my other friend has a PA system. Well, maybe we can do a live thing. Oh, you write songs, you play guitar. Well, let me help you be the band, and I'll put people together. I just wanted to get things done, and I by default learned how to do all these different things. Today, it's way, way more available. So why not? Yeah. Why not make it less precious? Let everybody do everything.
Well, going back to what you said, everyone can do it. So everyone can cook too. So if you have a palate, and you understand what tastes good, you can make something taste good for other people, right?
Yeah.
So if you know what sounds good, you can mess around with the tools enough to get something to translate that sounds good. But going back to last week, for it to stand the test of time takes practice, right? For it to maximize on all platforms simultaneously, on multiple speaker systems, and thinking in this more broad spectrum, I think does take a professional. You can get lucky, obviously. You can make your first pasta and it comes out and it's the perfect al dente, and that's great. That can happen, but it does take trial and error. So I think the professional part of it still stands, and you can be good at a lot of things and a master of none of them, and you can get by. I don't know how long that career trajectory lasts, though.
Well, it used to be a rarer thing to be able to do everything. I mean, like I said, when I was a teenager, the idea that I could play guitar and drums and record something and mix it was sort of an unusual thing. But now everybody can do it, and that's really wonderful.
I think it's wonderful.
It's you're talking about. Maybe it's an interesting thing to pivot to, because there's a conversation that part of our conversation last week was about compression, about finishing, because a lot of people who are young mixers, producers, being like, wait, he hates compression, he doesn't use compression, and I got probably 7 or 8 messages specifically like, wait, what does he mean when he says he doesn't compress? And if I can explain it, and then you please elaborate and correct me, you are doing a very specific as we've talked about, a finishing part of the process. So you are getting vocals, drums, all these other things as oftentimes as stems that are compressed and EQ'd and all that kind of stuff. And obviously vocals generally are compressed. You're getting lots and lots of compression before it reaches you. And therefore you are taking it upon yourself to try to add something different. How do you think about that?
Well, maybe, right? Maybe. If the stem is there and it's given to me, I don't know what was done to it. I don't ask what was done to it. I can hear, I can hear if there was compression on it. Yeah, I think there's two topics in what you're saying.
Yep.
Yes, I don't reach for a compressor first. So if we're going to talk about compression, I would first like to, and you can step in here as the every producer, the every mixer in response to this, but I would ask, why are you compressing, right? Mm-hmm. So people are saying, wow, he doesn't, why doesn't he? I'd like to ask, why do you?
Well, I just learned that that's what you do. That's part of it. Right. And certainly the sound of like distressors on drums or an 1176 on a vocal or, an LA2A on acoustic guitar, these sort of things I associate with a certain kind of sound that's in recording history. Yeah. Tyler says there to make it louder, to even out dynamics.
But exactly. That's misinformation. That is not how to make it louder. To make it louder, you turn the gain up, right? It's simple. So the output of the compressor makes it louder. The input makes it quieter, right?
It makes it appear louder.
Sure.
Like compressor.
It can. It can also make it appear smaller.
Yep, absolutely.
And my feeling is with poor monitoring, and you go too far, 9 times out of 10, you're making the sound smaller.
Mm.
So I'm having the opposite reaction to people's compression, where I'm hearing it sound smaller most of the time. And that's how Tony taught me to be more sensitive to compression. And then it wasn't until I got good speakers and a good monitoring setup that I was able to even hear the difference, or be in a good room that made me say, oh, wait, why did I do that? Right? We can go on about that. I mean, I also think that compression changes the feel of things. And why am I changing the feel of the producer's hi-hat pattern? It was dialed in on their part. So why am I changing that? Can I enhance it in other ways? Yeah, sure. Maybe it needs to poke out more, but why am I going to shift to a compressor technique versus messing with the transients, right? We have new tools. So when you bring up the specifics in gear that you just said, like a distressor on drums, like, I don't know. I don't think about a tool that was used in the 90s as often. Like, I don't, I'm like, what's the new tool? Where are we moving towards? I just don't want to fuck with the producer's shit.
Well, and it's a really important point. And again, so people aren't confused by it, you were talking about in modern production, people are, when I send in a production, I'm mixing it. I'm compressing or limiting, or I'm EQing, I'm doing all the things creatively to make it sound a certain way. You are then tasked as the finisher mixer with refining that more. So oftentimes you're getting over compressed, creatively compressed. I mean,
creatively compressed.
Well, there's a lot of records when you listen to, whether it's hip hop or dance or rock or whatever, you hear lots of compression in the beats. In the, a hi-hat pattern will feel differently when you compress the drums as a drum bus quite a bit, because you get the release of the hats, like the kick drum hits and then the hats kind of come out after, and that actually changes the groove in a really interesting way. And so
it can.
You wouldn't add that as the point. Like, people will be doing that in their creative process, but you won't. You'll be very careful about adding that. I will say, I think, I don't even know if this can be quantified in this way, but I think the thing that took me the longest to hear is compression. Compression is something that takes years and years of just doing it to really get a feel for. It's something that I think Eric Valentine is as good at as anybody. His ability to hear attack and release and distortion of, like, his Unfairchild, the Undertone Audio Unfairchild, which is an amazing box, which I know you have. So I assume you use.
That's not a compressor.
It's a saturation box because of all.
It's a saturation box. It's a limiter. It's not a compressor. It doesn't. I don't move the needle. If I do a parallel on my drum bus, which is often through that, the needle moves slightly, maybe on the kick drum, you know, that's not why I'm using it though, right? So that's why I say, why are you compressing? Like, I just want to know why. And the answers that we're getting back, first of all, you said, Tyler texted, we're getting back kind of wrong answers. That's not what you do to make something louder. But I want to jump back to something you said when you're producing and you're doing a rough mix. I wrote this down. I want to ask you, when you send off a song to a mixer, what are your expectations from that mixer? Why is the song even getting mixed in the first place?
That's a very interesting question. I'd say half of the time. Well, so I've probably mixed, I would say, half of the things that I've produced.
Sure.
And that's from little records to big records to radio records to weird indie records, whatever. I'd say of the other 50% of stuff that I've sent off to mixers, I'd say most of that is because there's a mixer already attached to the project. You know, that's the honest answer, is that, or that, you know, like with One Direction stuff, like Serban was the guy. So I knew that. I knew when I was producing it, it was going to go to Serban. So I figured out my dialogue with him about how to set up the Pro Tools session and what to send him and all that.
Well, let's move aside from the why it had to get there.
Yeah.
What are the expectations?
So I was going to say, so the other ones, what I'm hoping for from a mixer is simply, for lack of a better term, to make it sound better, to do things that I couldn't achieve. I mean, part of, you know, I feel like I've delivered great mixes, but I'm not a great consistent mixer in the way that someone like you or Manny or Serban or some of these guys that are really career mixers that do this every day specifically. I think I always feel like I'm running into messiness in my mix. I can't get the clarity, or I can't get the transients to hit, or when it's not as loud as other people's stuff, but yet when it is loud, I kill the dynamics. I think it's like an expertise that and an objective ear. I guess the objective ear and expertise.
But what if the record calls for the mixer to inject mystery and lack of clarity into it?
It's funny that the first time Serban mixed one of my songs, a Demi Lovato song years ago. And I was in Paris at the time on vacation, and it was the first time I had someone stream a mix to me too. So I was with him on the phone and listening on headphones. He was streaming it through iTunes, I think, at the time. Now we have the audio movers and other stuff. And I remember there was a moment where there was so much compression or saturation or whatever on the track that the vocal on a downbeat like came back a little bit, and I was like, and I told him, I was like, can you automate that vocal up so I can really hear the word clearly? And he said, I can do that, and let me play it for you, but there may be something about that moment feeling a little more chaotic and less clear that will make it feel more exciting and more emotional. I don't know if he said it that way. That's how I read it from him when he explained it. This is years ago. But it was a really interesting point that he had a perspective on it that was different than mine, and that in and of itself was important to get another trusted ear. That's why to collaborate generally is to get other people's perspective. But someone who's has an ear like yours or like Serban's or one of these great mixers, it's really about them making decisions and suggesting things that I wouldn't have done otherwise.
Right. So on that note, kind of thinking about going back to the collaborative process in their team, and you kind of pass this off to this mysterious mixer that you're not really in a complete open dialogue with. If I make a move and someone says, hey, that thing you did, I don't like it. It's like, okay, can I talk to you about why I did it? And then maybe we can come to a understanding of maybe there's a happy medium. Maybe there's something that's telling a story that you don't like it now, but maybe with our collaboration and our minds joining together, we can take that idea a little further, because you are the producer and you do have a vision for this. But maybe I could have sparked something, right? And when you're working collaboratively with someone, say it's in the room, and you start down a path, and there's a glimpse of hope at the end of the tunnel, you're both going to join in and try to get it there. When you're alone, you're second guessing. I don't want to change it. There's demoitis, which we should have a whole hour talk about what demoitis even is. It's a complete disease.
We could talk for hours and hours about that. We probably will. Yeah.
I think it's really relevant to the conversation. That's why I asked you, when you're sending something off and maybe you think it needs to get mixed, does the whole team think it needs to be mixed? What do they think the mix is? A mixer is thought to do compression and EQ and leveling.
And yet we hear now that you don't even compress.
I very rarely change anybody's levels. I very rarely compress. And I EQ very, very deliberately. So
I have to ask you the obvious question. Then what do you do?
Exactly. I don't know. I should probably quit and just start cooking food all the time.
I mean, I'm down. Invite me over.
No, I think what I do is I don't think about what I do. So I actually don't have a good answer for this. And maybe this is something that I need to sit on. But I think I add an emotional depth to records. I think I try to make it a bit more tangible. Like you can reach into the speakers or make the speakers disappear and you can jump into the song. I think that carving out certain areas and certain frequencies of certain instruments make you able to feel the transients a bit more. And again, tangibility. I want to be able to feel the groove. So not to say that the rough mix didn't feel that way, but rough mixes tend to be thrown together, flattened like this. And I'm trying to just back it off a tiny bit so there's room for it to do this, to be
it's
kind
almost,
of more visible.
It's interesting because the way you're talking about it is almost how I used to look at mastering, which is like, hey, I'm gonna add some things to this, or subtract some things, or do the right kind of dynamic touch. But you're doing that in a much more in-depth way with the individual stems and
because in a mastering realm, there's not enough headroom at this point on most mixes to do that more broad. Like, this is how it's delivered to me. We're kind of medium dark, and we want to be brighter, and we can make it feel active, and the transients poke and mastering. I think we have to do that really, really refined now to get records, again, like last week discussing loudness, to not be numerically loud so they don't get turned down in a normalization algorithm, but also feel loud. Right?
Density, like you're talking about.
The density, sonic density and arrangement sparseness, right? So going back to God's plan, right? The arrangement is so sparse, but it feels dense because all that low end is so round and it feels wide. It's a mono bass, right? It's not a wide bass, but it feels wide because there's so much real estate down there. That's not. No, I'm not analog summing. I'm digital. Just going to answer that question.
Good. Yeah. It's interesting to the way you talk about that. Touches on a philosophy that I think you and I both generally agree on, although it's not necessary all the time, but the idea of the minimum effective dose. Like what can you do? And this is really what experience is. Like you have to learn a lot of things and try a lot of things in order to learn what not to do. You have to, I don't know, it's not really learn the rules to break the rules, but like learning learning how to go extreme on everything in order to pick the actual very rare cases where you want to go extreme and know that it's exactly the right thing, or the default of I'm going to EQ and compress everything and then you realize like, okay, wait, actually, what of this do I actually need now that I know how to make things fit together? Now I know how to, as a writer and producer, now that I know how to write a lyric, write a melody, do a piano arrangement, think about strings, think about density, think about harmonies, think about vocals, think about drums. Okay, now that's why like the Pharrells of the world are so amazing when you get, a track like one of my favorites of his, Drop It Like It's Hot, which has like 6 elements in the whole song, or a song like
Never
Grind
Changes.
In for clips back in the day, where it's just like a kick and a snare and a little boop, 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 and that's kind of the
There's
whole
no
track.
Bass in Drop It Like It's Hot, right? It's just the big bass drum.
There's a slight 808 pitch change in the hook.
Is there? Okay.
The 808, but it's very subtle, and I wouldn't notice it if I wasn't a super nerd for this shit. One of the questions we actually got, which I thought would be cool to ask you, which I've never asked you before. Somebody said, "What's a record that I don't know that has amazing production?" Or what's the most impressive production that I haven't heard? And I don't know if impressive is the right thing. I don't know if it necessarily needs to be production, but like like, are there records that you go back to that are like, man, this is always, whether it's nostalgic or whether it's technical or whatever, are there records you think about when you think about, man, vocal sound, or you think about great, you've referenced God's Plan a few times as a very modern, open, low end, which I think that the sound of that record is probably my favorite sounding Drake record. There's a few of them, but like the stuff that the 40, and then I can't remember the name of the mixer. I saw an interview.
Gadget.
Yeah, Gadget. So, I don't know who's doing what on those records. Sometimes it's hard to tell.
Both.
Yeah, but like their best work, I think, is really incredible. Are there contemporary things or things you go back to, particular things that you love listening to, nerding out on, nostalgic?
It's a good question. I'm going to have a pretty disappointing answer. I pretty much only listen to 60s and 70s Turkish and Iranian psych music.
Fucking, of course, you do.
And like 1930s jazz records or something.
But is that now? I mean, you referenced last week a production that reminded you of a Timbaland snare. So there's clearly like an era of that Timbaland stuff.
Early 2000s hip hop is kind of my, like, Usher's Confessions comes to mind. That whole record down, I think, is in no way was that a boring answer. Good, okay, good. It's the best music.
Why is Usher's Confessions such a great?
It's one of those records that it's kind of a dream to me. You can turn up the volume as loud as possible, and it just feels better, and better. It never gets harsh.
Confessions has Burn Confessions. It has Yaz on that record too.
Yeah. It's all on that, and it just sounds deep. It sounds rich and full. It feels dense, but it feels dynamic, and it still holds up now. So if you played that now, it actually sounds better than most records that came out. And that record was a #1 album, had #1 hits, right? It won in all the categories that we look for winning in our world, especially that R&B and hip hop has kind of taken over playlists and the charts in general. That still would hold up against anything that's played right now. I would put it up against anything that Travis Scott and Mike Dean are putting out. Someone commented last week that it was -5 and it still slaps. Play it next to Usher's Confessions album. Like it's not. It doesn't compete.
By the way, the guy that did that was part of Usher's band for a while. The guy that said that, so he'll appreciate that. That's Spencer.
Oh yeah, it's Spencer.
Amazing, amazing drummer, MD.
Yeah, I love Spencer.
Yeah. That's interesting, man. Yeah, I also think that is actually one of those records that I reference periodically. It's funny
that goes, man.
It's going to play for the next 100 years too. It's one of those songs that's just it's
still going to be played at weddings, right?
Forever.
Bobby Spencer. Yeah, it's still going to go forever, right? And Uptown Funk, same thing, right? Uptown Funk is reminiscent of a past era of music, but it is so much more expansive sounding than those records, right? So that's going to last for the next 4 decades until someone else makes another version of that. But the drums on that hit, and drums on a Al Green record hit, but it's not the same kind of hit, right?
Not the same.
So contemporary, we took that genre into a contemporary platform, right? And it worked.
Okay, analyze that for me as a record maker, and maybe I'll pitch in too. But the difference between the Usher record, just on like a EQ compression samples, the difference between a 70s funk record or soul record or R&B record and Usher's Confessions. What is tangibly different there? The samples are different. The high end is different. The gear doesn't seem to be. I guess it's all tape machines back then, so it's going to soften a lot of stuff. Talk to me about the differences.
Oh man, I mean, there's so many differences. There's everything is played on a 70s funk record, and
so consistency of dynamics with samples.
Yeah, because when a kick and a bass are played in a funk record, I mean, everyone's they're the best musicians of the time, but they're not landing kick and bass at the same time every time. They're not locking in that groove perfect every time, or there's flamming and inconsistencies to the low end. So that plays a huge role against a sample-based, gridded, even if it's a groove template, it's still gridded to some degree, right? Where the maximum impact can occur when a 60 cycle wave of a kick drum and bass meet, and there's this thrust, and it happens every time that happens.
Yeah, or it's compressed exactly, like it has side chain just slightly in the perfect spot every time.
Yes, it could. Every time. So the consistency is what's giving me like that modern sound.
Somebody asked, what is a groove template?
That's OG Volta. That's they know. They know.
They're being an asshole. What?
Man, that's a thing. Like when working with those guys, I love working with them so much. Their swings and their groove templates are so refined and so specific, and I don't want to mess with that, right? So when they send me a track, going back to compression, why am I compressing something that Raul already compressed and dialed in with his release that he wanted, right? Like, why am I changing that? So why am I doing that? So if I think it's bad, I'm going to hit him up. Be like, yo, can I get it without it? Like, I'm not. So
that's a question I wanted to ask you. How much? Okay, so when I'm sending off, when I either receive stems from a demo to do a production or receive stems to mix, or do you ask people for dry and wet versions of things? Do you just have a dialogue where if you need to go back? I think a lot of people probably wonder, okay, I'm sending my stuff off to a mixer. Should I just do all of my things and send it off? Should I undo some? Like when I was sending stuff off to people like Serban, I would actually take off plugins on my vocal chain because I want him to do his thing. But that's
you think you do.
I think I do.
You think you want us to do our thing. The artist wants it to sound like it sounded for the last 13 versions, right? So no disrespect to the producer, but I don't want to do my thing to your vocal. Yeah. I want to make the artist love his or her vocal, right? And that has already been decided upon before I get it. And I don't have an ego about that, right? Can I make the vocal sound better with my own chain? Maybe. But it's not going to sound the same, so it's a losing battle most of the time.
It gets into the demoitis conversation, which maybe we won't jump into, but it's interesting. So in my mind, as someone who learned about the definitions of these roles in a different era, it's important to realize that there's so much overlap that I guess one shouldn't expect. I don't know. That producers are doing mixing in the process and should continue to do that.
But it might not even be in the production process. It might be in the inherent recording, the recorded signal, right?
Just the vocal chain. So
if the vocal chain is being committed and the singer sings into this CL1B with the slowest release because the engineer has no idea what he's doing, right?
Right. Fast release on vocals, kids.
Yeah. But that is now always be mixing, commit. I don't kind of agree with that completely. But that's an interesting thought.
That's a very interesting topic, actually. But
if it's ingrained in that, that's how people heard it and are performing into it, right? So that affects the groove. Now you're going to send a raw vocal off to someone that wasn't in that session, didn't hear that they backed off from the mic on the hook, but you can't tell that they backed off on the mic on the hook because all the compression that's still happening is the threshold is set too low. So I'm not going to try to guess the scenario that it was recorded
or match the compression of the rough or something like that. It really interesting.
Now that all being said, okay, say I'm doing 2 songs a day. This just happened one day where I got a complete stem session, mix the vocal, and it took me like probably 15 minutes to mix the vocal, a couple hours to mix the track. It was amazing production, easy. The next session I did came from a homie of mine that recorded the vocal. So he left and I know him, he's one of my best friends and collaborators. So he's like, yo, I'm going to leave it. I know, we've worked together. It's Dennis Koshak. We did Khalid's whole album together. He's a great recording engineer. He's as good as it gets. He's like, yo, you can mess with this vocal all you want. I'm not going to commit the stem. That's different. He knows how I work and I know how he works. So I took off every plugin And then I ran it through the Unfair Child and some tubes, and I limited it with the Faraday limiter slightly after that from Good Hertz. That kind of is a Fairchild emulation that I think sounds good. And then a little bit of transient shaping and like barely any EQ because he recorded it well, right?
Yeah.
But the dynamics he let me mess with. So I'm not afraid of starting over on a vocal. And back to talking about compression and, oh, he doesn't compress. And then you talking about you kind of have to learn the extremes of these things. Let's get it clear on the chat that I know how to compress. I know how to use a compressor. That's why I choose not to, because I think there are other ways to get what I thought I was getting out of a compressor with other tools.
And so much of what you're receiving as from producers to mix have tons of compression and a vocal chain as a part of it. So you reaching for a compressor often doesn't make any sense at all.
Again, though, I don't know that for a fact.
But maybe your ears are good enough that you have a good idea.
Right. But that's besides the point.
Fair enough.
I could still mix a song that had no compressor on it without a compressor. So I don't care that they compressed or not. I can still do it without it, and I still want to challenge people to ask why they're using it.
Is it famous that was it Dark Side of the Moon or one of those records that has almost no compression or very little compression?
Sounds huge.
Sounds fucking enormous. Enormous.
It doesn't sound compressed. It's so active. There's so many transients, right? We touched on last week that as soon as you instantiate a compressor, it's compressing, right? So why are we getting rid of transients before we do anything to the sound?
When you say when you say transient, so of course I have a compressor. It has an attack and release. If I slow down the attack, there is a transient getting through. Yes,
yeah, but it's not the full transient. The minute
right, because the beginning of it is there, but then the rest of it, got you.
Not even the beginning. No, it is clipping the transient by 1/3 anytime the compressor gets engaged.
Even if the attack is slow, I thought the whole idea of an attack is that the very beginning gets through.
Yeah, that's what they want you to think.
That's what they want. This is okay. So those big compressors is a conspiracy. It's just not real.
I mean, like the mayor of LA still wants us to think that we're going to open up the city by July. Like,
is this going to turn into a political podcast?
I know. Let's go.
Here's what I think about neoliberalism, you guys.
If you had your way, would you prefer every vocal came in well recorded with no compression and clip gained well? That's what I'm getting at. Spider knows where I'm at. I don't want to assume that someone's compressing their vocal before it gets to me, because you can do it with clip gain. So I've recorded, Spider and I up here have recorded vocals on ribbon mics, really low and really dynamic. We've not forced, that's the wrong word. We've asked the singer, the performer, to care about their mic placement and stay there and focus on how that sounds best to them coming and going, right? Mic placement is really mic technique. And then balance the vocal that way first. And then I can go in and I can clip gain syllables, whole words, whole phrases, and kind of normalize the vocal, even it out, balance it out, get the dynamics and the feel of it how I want it without a compressor, right? Yeah. So we can do this without it.
It's interesting. Yeah, I remember, I can't remember which Lord Algie, Tom or Chris, that when I learned that they went through the whole vocal and normalized every word. I mean, that's and then of course they compressed it from there, but a very specific, a very specific technique for doing that. It's interesting. You know, one of the things that I always kind of forget about, but then when I focus on it, it turns out it yields great results, is like actual basic engineering technique, mic technique, mic placement, those sort of things, even with vocals, and having singers that know how to go back on a big note or overdo it on certain things. That mic technique, it feels like, is a really underrated thing these days. I assume you get quite a range of, it was Tom, Jesse, quite a range of vocals. How much easier is it to deal with somebody who's just paid attention a little bit on the mic technique?
It's everything. It's everything.
For
because
vocals,
if you're too close on the mic, then you have to take out too many low mids and then you lose fullness in the vocal, and that's how you get the super pop, bright, thin vocals, because they were just too far up on the mic on the C800, and then it sounds like this. To reduce that, then it's all of a sudden too too much of that in the reduction versus having it all balanced because of proper mic technique.
Because it's cardioid pattern means the closer you get, the more low end there is, right? I think it's cardioid pattern, and then if you had it in omni or figure eight, you wouldn't have the proximity effect, I think they call it. So when you
but you should. It's a distance factor, though.
That's what I mean. So everybody's too close, and that's why there's too much low end.
On every type of polar pattern.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You should be 6 inches plus back. Everything.
Nobody's recording omni vocals these days.
When you're no, of course not. But when you have a pop filter and it's up on the thing because you think that the singer thinks that they're hearing better at this point, right?
Yeah.
Turn the instrumental down. Like have the engineer and the vocal producer sort out the vocal monitoring mix for the artist.
Monitoring is huge.
It's huge part of it, right? Get that level balance correct before you start recording, because then you're not going to walk up to the mic. It's a psychological thing. They move closer to the mic because they can't hear themselves. Turn the volume of the, hopefully you have headphones where you can adjust the volume of the vocal and the track separately, minimally, right? You should be able to do that.
Tell me what you think about, maybe what do you have at this point, and then maybe you and I can both speak about what makes sense for people who don't have expertise or big budget monitoring. So you have a very specific monitoring setup. Do you have multiple sets of monitors? Do you monitor on headphones? And then if you don't have your ability to treat a room and get great monitoring, you talk about monitoring. We talk about monitoring being such an important thing. I'll say briefly, for me, I always like multiple monitoring sources. And of course, I'm doing more songwriting and production than mixing, but like I have 3 sets of monitors. I have headphones that I love, and I do the car test. So I have 5 different speaker systems I love to move around and reference things on. Do you have just one at this point because you know it so well? Do you have a test anywhere else? What do you think?
I mean, I guess I have 2. I have the PMC MB3 XBDs, and then I have AirPods.
AirPods, I love that.
And let's go with the phone as well. So,
so 3. I mean, that's 3 legit. So one where you can hear everything perfectly clear, and 2 that are what people are going to listen to it on. Yeah,
I don't necessarily subscribe to the 7 sets of speakers on the console. Yeah. Rory says it best. It's like 7 people give you slightly different ways to the Staples Center, and they tell you slightly different lies. Who gets there first?
Well, it used to be get a monitoring setup that has good low end, and then something that doesn't have low end to reference. But now this is 15 years ago. But now it's monitoring setup and then phone and AirPods.
Yes,
I mean that seems pretty complete. Do you think that
monitor system that has no added distortion? No built-in limiting that is affected at low thresholds.
But my Mackies smack hard when they distort though. Which is fire.
Yeah, but do the speakers hit hard, or does the mix hit hard?
I don't know. They have a little red light that says that it has an internal limiter to it.
Right. Are you clipping because you have too much 12 hertz?
Honestly,
or is your
I don't know anymore.
Going hard, right? I don't want any speaker system lying to me, making me feel like my shit is harder than it actually is, right? I don't want a DAC that's distorting and adding clipping, so I all of a sudden think that my kick is punchy when you bring it everywhere else and it's dull because my DAC is clipping, right? I can't
tell you how many times that happens. I'm in Ableton and I'm just slamming it. I'm like, this beat sounds so hard, and I realize it's just clipping the master and I'm playing it really loud.
Sounds like it's hard. It's like, it's not really hard.
Do you listen very quietly?
Actually, that's an interesting thing. No, I mix pretty loud because I want to have fun. That's why that conversation last week of mono mixing. I don't mix in mono because it's not fun.
Yeah.
I like to have fun. I'm excited about what I get to do on a daily basis. I love what I do. I want that to translate to the people that I work with. I listen loud, but I also was talking with some homies last week that I, for no reason, start sweating when I'm mixing loud, and I feel like like I'm all of a sudden anxious for no reason. And I started Googling the effects on loudness, long periods of high SPLs and cortisol excretion. And
of course you Googled that. That's great.
Yeah, but I want I want that one spike of cortisol at between 7 and 7:30 a.m. that everybody gets to get out of bed, circadian rhythm style. I don't want to spike my cortisol during the day. I don't want to feel stressed for no reason, right?
Yeah.
So I'm actually contemplating turning down, and kind of finding that sweet spot, or at least not stay at the highest volume for as long as I usually do. I love low end. If you can't tell from my mixes, if you don't know what I mix, there's a lot of
spectacular.
I dial that in first, and I have just the right amount of high mids and highs that kind of will feel competitive when they're played on the radio or on playlist side. That's kind of my overarching theory behind how I mix, and that's probably for another hour conversation.
We'll do this again,
but I hope so. But I actually do mix loud, and I don't know if I want to. When I run out of coffee from the beans I have now, I'm going to start going decaf. And I've been drinking coffee since I'm 16 every day. So I just want to mitigate cortisol, from my life as much as possible.
Yeah.
And I think loud mixing might do that.
That was an interesting question in the comments. Do you walk around the room listening?
I have a pretty big space, so I do that pretty often. Let's talk about decaf. Not yet. I'll have to experiment and see if I actually go down that path. Is the beard itchy, Spencer? No, it's not. I use.
So we got the important questions now. We got some amazing questions like that. I don't know if we want to go into full silly mode.
Let's do some rapid fire questions to do the last 10 minutes.
Okay, rapid fire questions.
Well, no, but let me answer the first. I do walk around the room. It's very important. Yesterday, I was finishing up a mix, and I was about to bounce it. I went to do some dishes, pressed play on it, had it pretty loud, and I noticed the snare was blaringly loud from the back of my loft from my kitchen. And then I was like, well, maybe it's just the placement of where I'm in the room now. Then I went over there on a fresh ear. I'm like, no, the snare is just a little bit too loud. It's getting in the way of the vocal. So turn that down. So, of course, there's multiple perspectives around the room.
Perspective is a big thing for me. I'm constantly doing that. I like, you talk about doing multiple mixes in a day. I assume you're you're jumping between songs a lot. I find that hugely helpful for producing, for writing. I mean, writing's a little different because part of songwriting is really about capturing an emotional moment that's happening, a little bit of lightning in the bottle, which can happen with production, mixing, all kinds of things, but especially songwriting. But when I'm producing things, I love spending 40 minutes on something, going hard, and then getting a cup of coffee with caffeine, jumping to another song, listening to something else, and then coming back to it. Perspective seems to be a hugely important thing for me.
The 40 on, 20 off, or 45 on, 15 off is very ideal.
Taking breaks, hugely important for getting perspective on things.
Yeah, I do that a lot. That's the one downside of this quarantine, I would say. The one downside, one of many downsides, is that I can't walk to the coffee shop to get coffee. So, and that would be my thing. It would be a quick 10-minute, it's right down the street. So go get an espresso, come back. Maybe on the way back, listen in AirPods to see where I'm at and have done a rough bounce. Now I'll stream it to my phone before I do a bounce and walk around the loft with AirPods in to double check that.
Nice. A good question here. Ear breaks a lot or a little when you're working on multiple mixes? I think it's the same. I think you just take ear breaks.
I just take ear breaks. I meditate between each song. I'll maybe make a call between each song. I'll do something between each song. Maybe some push-ups, even 15 push-ups, just something.
Somebody asked about wearing pants. Totally optional.
Let's leave that one there.
Do you often use A/B with references while mixing or before exporting? Yeah,
no
A/Bing at all. Maybe you just check out the rough mix, but other than that, it's.
Listen. If I'm mixing an artist for the first time, I may put on a song like for this Fletcher thing that just came out. I checked the last single and Manny mixed it. It was who's, what's her vocal? What has she approved in the past?
Yeah. What have they liked in the past? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I've done that. It's rare, but
I'm checking vocal sound when I do that sort of stuff. Is what is the artist? How is the artist used to hearing themselves?
Yeah.
Is it similar to the rough mix? Do I want?
And what can I do to shock them into realizing that there is another perspective on their voice? So I can deliver something.
I think it was Spider that asked this. What have you learned from Jon that influenced how you work? So that's for me. And so I think my answer to that is simplicity. I love how you are we talked about earlier, trying to do the minimum effective thing. It's a really powerful idea. The more I work in making records, it applies to everything. It applies to writing lyrics. It applies to doing production. It applies to mixing. What's the simplest effective version? Because that ultimately is what's going to communicate the power of the music and the emotion the best.
Yeah, agreed.
But that's not a question for you. Let's see.
That's fine.
So somebody asked about different genres. Do you think that way at all? Do you think, I mean, you've probably mixed all kinds of things. I actually don't know the spectrum, but as a mixer,
I'm mixing a country thing right now, mixing an R&B thing, and mixing singer songwriter guitar vocal, all in the same 2 days. I don't know. I like all music.
Me too. I'm exactly the same way. Jerry asked about waves versus MP3s. When you bounce things, when you listen to things, when you send things out, does it?
I don't want to. I don't know how to answer that. Whatever y'all want to do. Spider said, I did a jazz record like last month or 2 months ago or something. I do MP3. I like the way MP3s sound. That's how I'm sending it out to other people, so I should hear how it's going to sound. It doesn't matter though.
Is there a bit rate that you choose?
Oh, always 16.
I'm sorry. 192, 256,
sample rate,
320.
441, 441 always.
The MP3 compression. There's
I downsample everything the 441 before I mix. My assistant does it. I don't hear it any other way.
We'll have your assistant on next time.
Yeah, it's always 441.
Well, we got another 2 minutes. I mean, obviously we could go back on live, but I think we just
let's keep rapid firing. Oh, we should keep going. No, let's go back on.
You want to go back on live? And keep going?
There's more people now than before, so we should just keep going.
Let's see. Got a favorite plugin right now. I don't think you want to answer that.
Nope, don't want to answer that.
How did you start out? What was your first program? Or how did you first start making records? A 4-track Tascam and a 16-track Korg digital mixer. Was it a 4-track Tascam, like a Porta Studio?
Yeah.
A cassette tape?
Cassette, yeah.
So I went from a 464 to Cubase to Pro Tools with Eric. Pro Tools for 15 years. I still use Pro Tools. And then I switched to Ableton for creation a year ago. Are you all Pro Tools with everything?
No, and when I produce, I produce in Ableton, but I quit production, so.
You quit production, yet you still have songs coming out, which is amazing.
Yeah, but I quit it. I'll finish people's productions in the mix process. I still have Ableton, and I still have, I don't know, whatever.
Oh, it says 2 minutes remaining. So do you want to jump back on for a little bit more in 2 minutes?
Yeah, let's jump back on and talk differently about things, and maybe not the mixing process of the. Oh, nah.
You reserve the right to move on from questions. Yeah, there's a lot of questions about low end. Maybe we dig into that a little bit. I mean, as someone who is also obsessed with low end, growing up listening to rock records, but growing up in Oakland and hearing hip hop and Too Short records.
I'll talk kind of how often do you. Now we're talking. How often do you meditate? I like that question. I actually want to say in this last minute that I'm on the eve of what will be my year straight of meditation. So I hit 364 days in a row today, and tomorrow will be 365, which I'm very much looking forward to tomorrow morning and kind of hitting that streak.
Very interesting.
I'm going to be more lenient on myself after it, but I told myself I would do a year straight meditating every day, no matter where I was. I was in Turkey at a point. I've traveled to New York a bunch. I went to San Francisco. I went to Vancouver. I did a bunch last year of traveling, and I still did it.
That's amazing. That's when it gets the most challenging. I've been posting about meditation and talking to a lot of people about it too. It's a really interesting and important, I think, for both of us, an important part of creativity and focus and happiness and all of that.
We can talk. See, I was going to talk about. So we just jump. Do we? Well, I guess it's going to go.
I'll end it right now. I got to make sure I save it because I didn't.
Let's jump right back on.
When it ends, we'll be back on in 2 minutes.
Cool.
All right, so I'll end it right now, and we'll see everybody back on in 2 minutes.
Hey, bye.
Hey, we're back.
So something kind of on the meditation, but also with low end. We can talk about all of this, right? So simultaneously thinking about when I was in my meditation for an hour, and I think you posted something 2 days ago. You did an hour, and you said, I put the timer on, I sit there. A lot of the time, I'm in thought, but I'm not judging it. That's what it is, right? And that's the process. So today, I'm in this hour. I actually had a lot of it. It was easier this time than last time. I was pretty down with just sitting there. Felt really good. But I was thinking about our discussion today. I was thinking about what meditation, how it informs the practice. And what I could remember, I was talking with Spider about this the other night. I can remember 9 out of 10 moves that I make, right? So therefore, I'm going into things with intention. So I'm coming at it, I know why I use a certain plugin. So we talk about favorite plugins, it's kind of irrelevant. It's why do I use a certain plugin, right? These are kind of better questions.
What are you trying to achieve?
Well, yeah, what am I trying to achieve? So I want to have minimal tools, the minimum effective dose, like you like to say, how to get to the desired result. So when I think about I want something to feel modulated, I'm going to reach for something that does a shift left-right that makes things sound not so sterile out of a synth box or something.
Do you want to name them, or just you don't want to?
I don't. Yeah. Sure, I just don't want to talk equipment as much. But yes, the Good Hertz, Wow, and Flutter tape machine emulator is really good for that. And I'm thinking deliberately about these moves. So when I'm meditating and I get up and I go to do the first mix of the day, it's usually my fastest. I'm not second guessing. I know where to get on things. You can look at the sessions. They're super minimal, what plugins that I'm using. And it's all because I'm prepared, right? We started off the conversation by talking about that. Talking about habits, right? So I right before this, I wanted to brush my teeth just in case there's like something going on this live thing.
You look great.
And I switched where my toothbrush is on my counter for the first time since I moved into this loft 4.5 years ago, right? So my brain is reaching to the right for the toothpaste, for the toothbrush, even though it's now on the left. And this has been 2 weeks, and I'm still reaching to the right, right? So we know that we're creatures of habits. We know that we don't know why we do the things that we do, right? So I can't tell you why I do the things that I do, but I kind of can when I'm in a meditative state, right? So I don't think about what I'm trying to achieve when I'm trying to achieve it, but I can look back now and say, that's why I did it. And I know 9 out of 10 moves that I make. And I think meditation helps with that, right? It's the kind of distillation of all the internal or the external affectation of the world, and then deliberate output, and where to focus your energy.
It's funny. I was going to say I've had a lot of discussions about meditation with people in the last week because I've been posting more about it. I've been a daily 10-minute meditator on and off, probably with like a 90% compliance for the last like 5 years, but just started this adding an hour a day of unguided, just eyes closed. Yesterday was day 10, I think. And the thing I notice about it, and we should talk about also meditation means so many different things to so many different people. It's sort of like saying exercise.
Sure.
You and I do a sort of a variety of meditations, but generally the idea being you're going to sit quietly, you're going to get lost in thought, and then you're going to recognize that you're lost in thought, oftentimes through a guide or focusing on your breath or something like that. Or I should say, you get lost in thought, and then you realize that you're lost in thought, and you come back to some centered place. For people who do TM, it's a mantra. If you do kind of Vipassana, it's just a breath. But something like the Waking Up course by Sam Harris has these guided meditations that are very much about a spectrum of things, but the fundamental is learning how to recognize that you're lost in thought. And what that does, like you said, it trains you to recognize that you have these automatic habits and then recognize that they exist so that you can go ahead and continue to do them, but it allows you to make more deliberate decisions about things that have become automatic.
Well, it's learning, unlearning, and then relearning, right?
And decide and choosing, like instead of just doing things automatically. So how does that connect that to low end for me?
Okay, so if you want to have expansive low end, you need to make room for it, right? So if you want to have this approach to life, and pinpoint and choose what to put your energy on in a given moment, you need to make room for it, right? You have to have less excuses. So I can have the excuse of the producer loved the rough, so I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to leave the loudness where it's at to make them happy and get this across the line with no friction, right? But if I want richer, deeper low end, I might have to do a bold move and turn everything down 6 dB or so to give myself headroom to craft that low end, right? So you have to be brave in a sense, because there's going to be a lot of work rebalancing things to make that energy of the rough come back. But you have to place the low end first in this context. So
that's how you're always thinking about records, right? You're always low end is where it starts.
Low.
Oh, did you wait? Lost you for a second?
Yeah, you froze. Okay, so yes, it's low end and vocal stack, right? But it's intentional, and it's not something you can dilly dally with. You know, you have to go in. You have to be like, okay, this is where I'm going to put it. And I don't think numerically. I'm not like, I'm putting my kick at -3 and it's going to peak there the entire time. I've never thought that. I think when I was listening to Skrillex a lot, when he was coming out with Bangarang, his kick was at 0, and I gave it a shot, and I put everything at 0. I had an L1 limiter on every bus that I had, like trying to get it to hit, like and still be dynamic. And I think that extreme version of this is what got me to where I am now, where it's kind of a feel thing, right? It kind of just settles in at a certain place. And I talk about this a lot with my close homies over here. Where like, I don't know how I do it, I just do it at this point. So, but coming back and taking a step back and non-judgmentally, like when you're meditating and you just start again, you begin again, I can say, well, I do know what I'm doing, right? I am lowering the volume of everything, and then I'm remaking that level up with EQ, right? So if I take 6 dB down overall, I might need 6 dB of 60 hertz of low end, right? So I might need to remake that amount. But now I have the headroom to do that. But then you can kind of control the release of that low end, and you have more control than letting the limiter dictate everything that happens in your mix in the low end. So
I definitely, I constantly succumb to the something is not clear, so I turn it up. I feel like everybody as a record maker is constantly trying to turn everything up to make it clear.
I think that's the opposite.
Yeah, very much.
I think of it the opposite, right? It's like, well, if someone keeps saying the vocal's louder, needs to be louder, I'm saying what's in the way of the vocal every time. I don't believe in vocal. I don't send a vocal up mix.
That's a really great truism for the mixing side, the engineering side, is making room for things rather than turning them up.
Yeah, it's like when you're
which might be turning other things down too.
When you're like a lighting set designer, you're not necessarily lighting the star, you're lighting the set around her. Like a David Lynch film, it's like the red curtains are lit up, the lead is not lit up.
Yep.
So we're carving space and creating space behind and illuminating the person in front of it. So that, thinking numerically, that's going to exist in the mid-range most of the time, right? It's always different. We're not going to talk about where it's going to sit. It's always different. The key of the song matters.
Definitely.
But you're carving mid-range out of other instruments. That being said, in a great arrangement done by a great producer with a great top line on it, that job is done for you most of the time. When I'm talking about creating headroom to get low end, though, that gets you in trouble, because that all kind of falls apart and you have to rebuild it. So you have to constantly A/B with the rough to make sure you're recreating that vibe that was there. So that's why it takes a bit more work. It doesn't take much more time necessarily, but it takes more technical work to remake someone's energy when you're turning things down a substantial amount. And I think that's my approach always. And I'm not going to be the one that just sends it back the same volume or a little louder. It's just never going to be what I do. Interesting.
Yeah. Trying to, I feel like.
Does that make sense? Am I answering the question?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't even know if there was a question. I think we just started talking.
These are things we'll just, discussing low end. I mean, these are things that are would be an interesting, and one of the few and only things I would love to demonstrate one day is figure out how to do it on a proper stream with proper audio quality. Where I would
that's the challenge, right?
Yeah. A gain structure approach, because I don't even know if everybody knows what gain structure even is.
That was actually the question I was going to ask after that is gain structure, gain staging, those sort of things. How do people learn about that these days? I guess because there's.
Can mixing be a form of meditation? Sorry, let's just jump on that for a second. Absolutely. Any creative process that can get you into a flow state is meditative, right? And I repeat myself a lot when I say this, but the minute you recognize you're in a flow state is when you're not in the flow state anymore. So you want to ride that flow state as long as possible. And when you start realizing that you're riding that, you can stay on it and you can find that gap of, all right, I'm making moves, but I'm in the flow state. You're going to get the song done faster because you're going to make the right deliberate moves because you're flowing through it. And
same with production, same with
I was going to say, when you were talking earlier about the capturing emotion in the moment in a song, that's your job as the producer and the songwriter. That's the job of every aspect of any creative process, is to not let that go away.
Just to capture things as they happen. Yes. And whether that's an emotional lyric of somebody writing a thing on the couch, or whether it's you by yourself making a mix get together.
Yes. So I think, oh my God, I'm getting mix notes sent to me right now. Right? We went over the hour, so I'm on. Anyway, it's fine.
We'll do another 10 minutes, and we'll pick it up again.
We'll do another 15. We'll go an hour and a half. We'll do a 90.
Go an hour and a half. 90 minutes. That sounds good.
Yeah. So thinking about, I try to hit that state as often as possible, and when I say try, that's probably the wrong language. One isn't trying to be in a flow state; you just become in one, and that's interesting. Music can be an object of meditation from Spider. Yeah. There's meditation music for that reason. I was contemplating even doing that today. I was thinking, should I do an hour meditation unguided, but have some sort of Zen Japanese garden music on in the background? I thought that was an interesting way to practice. I didn't do that yet, but I'm thinking about that as well.
Do you so one of the things, I feel like it took me a number of years of just making records and trying things in order to get to the place where I could get into a flow state with it. It seems like a lot of that is, I don't know, for some reason I always think of John Coltrane, where it's like you could play scales for years and years and years, and then at some point you don't think about the scales, you're just playing the instrument.
Yes.
I feel to an extent that's what you're talking about, which is you've done enough mixing, you've tried enough things to where now you can just sort of exist in it thoughtlessly. But if you add a mindful practice, add meditation, then you can basically make more of a deliberate choice of whether you let yourself just exist in the flow state versus analyze it. Is that how you think about it?
Yeah, because I fall in love over and over again with the process and the practice, right? I think.
How do you do that? That's a really important thing. I think a lot of people get, especially people that go from, I made records in my room for nobody and nobody cared about it. Then I started getting a few checks or started getting hired. Then all of a sudden I'm doing it for different reasons. How do you go back to, or how do you maintain that? Either go back or how do you maintain?
I don't know.
Maybe you've never dealt with that challenge. I don't know.
No, I definitely have. I don't know. I genuinely love it so much. And I feel lucky that I get to make, music for a living. I think it's kind of lame to say that, but I truly mean it. I feel really lucky that this is what I get to do. I stay curious. I'm hanging out with people that, people will hit me with, oh, have you tried this new plugin? I'm usually like, no, I don't need another plugin. That's usually my response, but that's kind of I usually look into it anyway, and I just decide I don't need another version.
That's the contrarian in you, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's a fair amount of that, but a very curious, open-minded, contrarian status. But I genuinely love it. And I think even, we always touch on that I cook food. Cooking has become another creative outlet that is very similar playing to mixing, right? Balancing of ingredients, the ingredients or the pieces of the song that are already given to me. The ingredients of the stew are pretty classic. I get to improv on the balances of them, and I can throw a couple little sprinkles in there of new things as I'm getting more comfortable, right? But that re-inspires the mix process too.
Yeah.
So I think about how I'm making something a bit more acidic in this stew, and I'm like, oh shit, that mix actually like gets spicier. Like, how do I add like this wide palate acid reaction to a mix that I feel like should be that way and brighter, but do that in my own concoction way. So I constantly just think of another way to frame it. It's probably the same thing, just reframed.
Well, that's an interesting thing that I've found. I've given this advice to a lot of people. I've taken it myself. When I forget to take it or I don't take it, my life is not as rich. I find it's really good to have a counterpoint to the main thing that we're doing. So to have either another creative outlet or psychological outlet that has different stakes. And I know not everybody deals with this. Maybe you have a version of it. Maybe that's what cooking is for you. But I find for me that if I'm making records and that process is really involved, and I'm my head is all the way in it, it's important for me to have some other process that I can balance off of it.
Yeah, I feel lucky and privileged that I get to make art for a living. But this is my life, and there is a part of it that has changed into I get checks for what I do. I do 2 pro bono albums a year, right? And I've given I call my studio the gift shop kind of for that reason. I cook dinners. I do these things as gifts because I'm mostly being exchanged currency to do this. And I realized that music was a hobby in the beginning, and then it became a profession, right? So I think we all need a hobby. So
that transition for me was difficult. We should talk about that transition at some point. Maybe it's not right now, but
great.
That going from hobby to profession has a lot. The collision of art and commerce is a really interesting topic. Maybe we can touch on that another time.
Let's do that. So at this point, I am kind of past that transition point and realizing kind of my gratitude towards where I'm at now, and the hard work. And acknowledging that I did work very hard to get to where I'm at now, and I still have to work hard to maintain it. But at this point, it will be on me if I fail and I don't get any more work. It's all on me. I have positioned myself well enough and created enough really great, solid relationships with great people that it will be on me if I fuck this up.
Seems like you'll do all right.
No one knows, right? No one knows. You don't know. I mean, you do. We kind of do, but we don't, right? We can choose to acknowledge that we do and exist that way, or choose to run in minimal amounts of fear. So I was listening to Sam Harris on Tim Ferriss today, and Tim asked him, how do you think about fear? And it was an interesting question to ask someone that's so a master of meditation, who he also thinks that he is not, which is really funny to hear him talk about that.
There's always levels to mastery, right?
Yeah, exactly. But there is use for fear, right? There's a border of when it informs how you should begin to behave, and until you get to that change in behavior, right? Mm-hmm. And that fear and that anxiety needs to be withstood and assessed and ruminated on, for lack of better terms, until you cross that border into I now know how to behave in this new place. So there is a function of fear. His example was COVID-19, getting boxes from Apple, right? He bought a new iPad right before the lockdown, and he did wipe the box, but he did this without a mask, right? He noticed himself in the moment. He's like, I might have brought virus into my home with my 8-year-old and my 11-year-old 15 feet away from me. And in that moment, he felt fear of, I need to assess this fear and how to move my behavior from here on out to live in this period of time, right? So that fear needs to be upheld until we move to the next degree of life.
Once you decide what the action is, you have to move away from it.
Yes, then you move away. And I've never heard fear described that well, because we think that we have more control, right? But if in an anxious period of time, like for example, sending a mix out, this is relatable to everyone. And if you're overly confident about what you do, good for you. But every time I send a mix,
I've been
doing this for so many years, I still get nervous that they're not going to like the mix every time. And then like that just happened the other day, and I got one note. Can you turn the pre-chorus vocal up? It's like, I know I'm good at this. I know why people are hiring me. I'm reliable. I know all these things about myself, yet I don't know them about myself, right? Objectively. So
that's an interesting thing. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
But I sit in that fear for too long, because if it isn't going to work out, right? So you sit in the fear and then it doesn't work out, you double that length of fear, because now you're saying, oh, they didn't like it, you're inadequate. So for no reason, you have doubled the length of that anxiety, versus not being anxious, finding out it didn't work out, then feeling that sense of letdown and disappointment instead of feeling it twice.
It gets to my I have a whiteboard in my kitchen where I write quotes on my current quote, which has been up for a long time. There's a Naval quote, which is be impatient with action, be patient with results. It's a version of this, which is, if you have the anxiety and fear, understand it, let it motivate you, and then once you make the action, just release it and let it go. I'm always nervous every time I send anything off to anybody. Always. So I want it to be great. I wonder too, people talk about this, if I lose that nervousness, do I stop doing good work? I think it's okay to have that. You want to hold yourself to a high standard, not be hard on yourself, but challenge yourself to be great.
Yes. And it's a constant challenge. I think that, jumping back to an earlier topic, I think that's why
the imposter syndrome.
Yeah,
sure.
Exactly. I think that's why we love what we do, because we want the challenge. I love a good challenge. I love a good puzzle. I love all of that. You know, like when I sent you that Q-tip quarantine puzzle thing, you got to take the guitar pick out of the thing. Like, I sat there.
I sent it to a couple other people too. That's one of those things that you challenge oneself for sure. Always.
Yeah. So yeah, I get out of your own way.
It turns out all those self-helpy things, there's actually some truth in pretty much all of them. Let's see if there's any other rapid fire questions.
Yeah, sure.
There's some. Somebody asked last time we were talking about habits. 3 habits to improve your life. Hard to know if that means what should I add. I don't know what habits you have or I have.
I'm not a self-help book.
You're not?
A morning routine.
Morning routine's huge. I finally got a good morning routine in like the last few weeks after trying all kinds of different things.
It's the most important thing I think that one can do. All it is to say, it can be 10 minutes, it can be 2 hours. Give yourself time to exist in your space for X amount of minutes per day, and then you can share that space otherwise. Punctuate your day with time for yourself somehow.
Somebody asked here, does someone meditate because of not doing well in their life or because they are doing well? I think I was saying to somebody yesterday, meditation is like stretching for mental health. If you and this is what you're saying, if you set aside time for your own mental health, whether you're happy, sad, whether you're busy, whether you're bored, whatever it is, it's beneficial across the board. Across the board. Hugely.
Yeah, I can't categorize it better or worse for either, because in the depressed states, when I meditate, I still feel depressed. And in the happy times that I meditate, I still feel happy. So it kind of expands and emboldens what's being felt at the moment, and sitting with it and choosing to bring attention to how to fix that sadness, or live in the happiness and expand that, right? So it's not going to change the mood necessarily, but it's going to reflect something back at you that you're going to have to deal with.
And put you in more control, or at least presence, and maybe not control, but presence of what you're doing. Are there any, I don't know if you think of things this way, are there habits as regards mixing, record making, good habits, bad habits, not necessarily technical habits. Maybe it is 10 minutes a day clarity before you go into mix. You said that after you do a long meditation, your first mix of the day is always better. Is there something that can be gleaned from that?
Well, you talked about the different types of meditation, and you only kind of talked about the recognizing the thought and seeing it to its completion. I'm really into his practice on sensation, right? So by the time that I'm recognizing all the sensations in my body, all the sounds, like the fact that there's more birds in my neighborhood now because the pollution is a lot lower in LA, I just become more emotionally available, right? I become more, did Spider just say that? Yeah.
He literally just said that's amazing.
I come more connected. So again, back to the deliberate decisions, like I'm feeling the groove, I'm feeling the song, I'm feeling the lyric because I'm making myself available for it. So I think that's one of the best habits.
Yeah. When I was younger, I would always be frustrated. Frustrated is the wrong word, but when people wouldn't give direct specific advice about like record making and things like that, like, okay, this is how you should set a EQ or a compressor for this sort of thing. And they would always say all the stuff we're saying now, the sort of more philosophical preparation stuff. It turns out that it really is that. It really is about preparing yourself to be in a position where you can do your best work.
Yeah.
That's what there's no trick or no plugin or none of that stuff is going to be nearly as useful to you as just being able to be your best self, be living your best life, but be your best self when you approach being creative. It really is about your mental state and being prepared to do it. And that will yield the best results. And it will make you learn quicker and learn new things. And that new plugin that you're excited to work on, if you're in the best mental place, you'll find the process of how it applies to what you're doing in the best way. It's more and more, the older I get, the more it really is about habits and setting myself up to do great work.
Yeah, and on that note as well, if you're not feeling it, check in on the deadline. Maybe today's not the day to cram all that work in because it's not going to reflect well on you. Maybe that's the last time you get hired from that person because you messed up and they didn't really need it when they told you they needed it.
Doing great work is way more important.
Yeah, I like to check in. I think that's a confidence thing. I think that's an experience thing, and develop relationships that you can say, man, like, do I have to do this today? And don't say it like that. Don't whine about it. But I like to check in. Hey, do we really have to do this on Sunday? Can it be done Monday? No, it needs to be on the executive's desk at Monday morning first thing. Sure.
Yeah, we have a meeting so I need it Monday, but it turns out the meeting is until Tuesday midday. So I go, cool. Well, can I get it to you Monday night then instead of Monday morning? I know it's a little late, but I'm, having those. That you're right. It is an experience and confidence thing, but that's something that people should try more. It turns out actually just being honest and saying, hey, I'm not able to get to this fully today. Is that all right? Can I give it to you a day later? Those sort of conversations, it turns out, are actually really great. I've learned that a lot.
And they normally turn out the way you want them to turn out.
Because ultimately, if that's what's going to get the best work, the answer is yes. Because everybody wants the best result. Because, a year from now when they look back, they didn't go, shit, they delivered that mix 3 days late. They go, that song is great.
It's great.
And it was successful, and that's what matters. Well, we're at about 90 minutes. Do you want to save it for next week?
Yeah, right on the dot. Yeah, actually, I have to start cooking my meatballs for later and sauce and do mix notes and then mix 2 songs before dinner later. So actually have a lot to do today.
Amazing.
There was an interesting question there that I just missed, though. What's your favorite color? Is your
black?
Is your mixing passion? Oh man, I missed it. Passion
or mission?
Mission based or passion based? And I would say that if I only have to choose the two, it would be passion based. I don't really go into anything on a mission. I don't think mission ever really equates in my head as the proper way to jump into anything.
I would have to get a definition of mission, but I think of it very much passion-based. And knowing that I really, everything I've done that gets toward the word great or successful or moves other people, I think pretty much everything has some amount of really heavy passion in it. Just I can't do good work if I'm not enjoying the process, there's obviously lots and lots of challenges, but it has to be passion-based. Otherwise I suck at my job.
Exactly. those are usually the hardest songs to get across the line, or the ones that you have friction with because you don't feel passionate about them.
And you're just like,
people can feel it. Yeah, why did I say yes? It's like,
that's the worst feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Shit. Great. Anything else?
Till next time.
Yeah, let's do it again next week.
I gotta go cook. I totally forgot. I got the onion ready to chop and the garlic's already cloved up.
I've been quarantined for a week, so I'm gonna come over and eat with you again soon.
Can't wait.
Thank you guys for all the feedback. Hit us up with more questions. We'll keep doing this and talking about whatever we end up
Tuesday at noon.
Tuesday at noon. Live with Matt Rad and John.
Yes.
All right,
cheers.
brother. Love you very much.
Love you too. Talk to you later.
Peace.
Peace.